So things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's Alex Eala. That's been a talk, and which is understandable. There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest.
Folks, let me tell you about the moment Novak Djokovic, the greatest tennis player to ever hold a racket, a man with 24 Grand Slam titles to his name, stopped his press conference to talk about a 20-year-old Filipina who had just lost her first-round match. And what he said should make every single tennis official in Melbourne hang their head in shame. Because what happened to Alex Eala at the 2026 Australian Open wasn't just a scheduling mistake, it wasn't just poor planning. It was a complete and utter failure to recognize what this young woman means to 115 million Filipinos around the world. And Djokovic, to his credit, was the only superstar brave enough to say it out loud. Here's the thing. When Alex Eala's name appeared on the Day 2 schedule for the Australian Open, tournament organizers made a decision that tennis journalist Jose Morgado called, and I'm quoting him directly here, just dumb. They put her on Court 6, not Rod Laver Arena, not Margaret Court Arena, not even Show Court 3. Court 6, Melbourne Park's so-called party court with limited seating capacity. And what happened next? Absolute chaos. Now let me take you back to January 19th, 2026. It's a Monday afternoon in Melbourne. The temperature is climbing, and thousands, of Filipino fans are descending on Melbourne Park with one mission: watch their girl, Alex, make her Australian Open main draw debut. This wasn't some random Tuesday qualifier. This was history in the making. Alex Eala is the first Filipino tennis player to ever compete in the main draw of a Grand Slam. The first in the entire history of the sport. And these fans, many of whom had traveled from across Australia, some who had flown in from the Philippines itself, they showed up ready to witness something special. But here's what they found instead: a line stretching all the way back to Rod Laver Arena. We're talking hundreds of meters of people standing shoulder to shoulder in the afternoon sun, waiting, hoping, praying they might get a seat. French tennis reporter Quentin Moinete posted video of the scene and called it hallucinant, unbelievable. The queue was so long, so packed, that it became the story of the day before a single ball was even struck. And guess what? Most of them never got in. That's right. Hundreds upon hundreds of Alex Eala's supporters, the most passionate, most dedicated fan base of any rising player on tour, were locked out, shut out, left to watch on big screens outside the venue while their hero played the biggest match of her life, just meters away. Veteran tennis reporter Ben Rothenberg saw it coming. He said, "This unwise court placement was one of my first reactions when looking at today's order of play." Everyone saw it coming. Everyone except, apparently, the people making the decisions. Now let's talk about what happened inside that packed Court 6, because this is where it gets even more frustrating. Alex Eala came out and absolutely demolished Alycia Parks in the first set. We're talking 6-0, a bagel. In 34 minutes, the Filipina sensation showed exactly why she's the hottest young player in women's tennis. Her left-handed forehand was cracking winners from every corner of the court. Her returns were landing deep, pushing Parks back on her heels. The crowd, those lucky few who actually made it inside, went absolutely wild. Philippine flags everywhere. "Let's go, Alex!" chants echoing off every wall. Every point, every winner, every Parks error met with thunderous roars that carried across Melbourne Park. Parks herself admitted afterward, "It was very difficult. I was expecting it, but I wasn't. She definitely has a good crowd." Let me translate that for you. The atmosphere was so intense, so overwhelmingly pro-Eala, that Parks was rattled. She was seen in tears after losing that first set. The noise, the energy, the sheer wall of Filipino support. It was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Let me give you some context on just how badly the Australian Open misjudged this situation. Alex Eala isn't some unknown qualifier hoping to steal a round. This is a player who, less than a year ago, shocked the entire tennis world at the 2025 Miami Open. As a wildcard ranked 141st in the world, she beat three Grand Slam champions in a single tournament. First, she took down Jelena Ostapenko, the 2017 French Open champion. Then she knocked out Madison Keys, who had just won the Australian Open weeks earlier. And then she dismantled Iga Swiatek, the world number 2, a 5-time Grand Slam champion, in straight sets, 6-2, 7-5. She broke Swiatek's serve 8 times in 10 games, 8 times, against arguably the most dominant player in women's tennis. After that match, Eala stood on court in complete disbelief. "I'm on cloud 9, she said, her voice trembling. Complete disbelief right now. That Miami run made Alex Eala a household name. It launched her into the WTA Top 100 for the first time. It proved that this wasn't some flash-in-the-pan talent. This was the real deal, a generational player carrying the hopes of an entire nation on her shoulders." So when the Australian Open schedule came out, and Alex Eala, now ranked in the top 50, coming off a semi-final appearance at the Auckland Classic, was placed on court 6, the tennis world collectively lost its mind. "WTA should have done their research better," one fan wrote. "They know Eala's appeal and should have pushed for a better stage." "She should easily be on an arena court," another commented. "Putting Eala on court 6 is just dumb," Morgado said plainly. But the criticism didn't stop there. Let's talk about what Novak Djokovic said, because this is the part that really matters. 2 days after Eala's match, Djokovic sat down for his post-match press conference, following a second-round victory over Francesco Maestrelli. He could have talked about his own game. He could have discussed his path to an 11th Australian Open title. Instead, when asked about the record-breaking crowds at Melbourne Park, he brought up Alex Eala by name. "I saw the other day with Alex Eala," Djokovic said. "Yeah, that's been a talk, which is understandable." He went on. "There's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from the Philippines, which is now a big deal. She's been the biggest ever tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest." Now listen to what he said next, because this is the part tournament officials should have tattooed on their foreheads. "You could argue that it was maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule her on a bigger court. Yes, yes. The greatest player in tennis history just called out the Australian Open for their treatment of Alex Eala. He validated what every Filipino fan was screaming from the rooftops. He acknowledged what the tennis media had been saying all day. They messed up, and they messed up badly. Now, Djokovic being Djokovic, he also tried to soften it a bit. He said she's young, she's just coming through, the schedule is packed with big names on the big courts. He called the crowd situation a good problem to have. But make no mistake about what happened here. Novak Djokovic, unprompted, used his platform as the biggest star in tennis to shine a spotlight on how Alex Eala was treated. That's not nothing. That's a legend of the sport saying, publicly, that the tournament got it wrong. And here's what makes it even more significant. Djokovic knows what it's like to be the outsider. He knows what it's like to represent a country that doesn't have a deep tennis tradition, to build a fan base from scratch, to fight for respect in a sport dominated by a handful of nations. When he speaks up for Alex Eala, it carries weight. But here's where it gets really frustrating. Because despite the chaos, despite the criticism, despite Djokovic himself suggesting she deserved a bigger stage, Alex Eala still had to play that match on court 6. And the pressure, the circumstances, the sheer weight of the moment, it got to her. After that dominant first set, Parks came out in the second with a completely different energy. She started finding her serve, blasting 12 aces by the end of the match. She sprinted out to a 3-0 lead. Eala fought back to 3-3, but Parks stayed composed, winning the final 3 games to take the set 6-3. In the decider, Parks broke early and never looked back. The final score, 0-6, 6-3, 6-2. Alex Eala's Australian Open debut, the moment 115 million Filipinos had been waiting for, ended in a first-round exit. And let me tell you something. When Eala spoke to reporters afterward, she didn't make excuses, she didn't blame the scheduling, she didn't complain about the chaos outside the court. Instead, she talked about what the moment meant for her country. "I'm still young, 20, so learning how to deal with all of this attention," she said. "I guess this is one of the moments that I can reflect on what this means for Philippine tennis." Then she added, "I'm the only Filipina in the draw this year. I'm the only Filipina that's ever been in the draw, I think. So there are positives to take away. There are positives to take away." This young woman, who just experienced one of the most chaotic, overwhelming, emotionally draining matches of her career, is talking about positives. She's thinking about what her presence means for the next generation of Filipino players. She's carrying that weight with grace and maturity beyond her years. She deserves better treatment. She deserves proper recognition. She deserves a stage that matches her stature in the sport. Now let me tell you what happened after the match, because the Australian Open's response tells you everything you need to know. When fans complained on social media about the scheduling disaster, the tournament's official account responded. You know what they said? They'd learn for next year. Learn for next year. That's it. That's the response to thousands of fans being locked out. That's the response to one of the most significant cultural moments in recent tennis history being reduced to a logistical nightmare. We'll learn for next year. Here's what I want to know. Why did it take a scheduling catastrophe for them to learn? The information was right there. Alex Eala's matches in Hong Kong had drawn lines over 100 meters long. Her practices at Melbourne Park before the tournament were so packed that she called them overwhelming. Australian tennis administrator Peter Johnston told Fox Sports, "She is a huge draw and a breakout star." Everyone knew. The WTA knew, Tennis Australia knew, the Australian Open knew, and still they put her on court 6. But here's the thing, most people missed about this whole situation. The controversy around Alex Eala's scheduling isn't just about one match. It's about a pattern. It's about how tennis treats players from countries outside the traditional powerhouses. Think about it. When a young American player starts making noise, they get prime-time slots on the big courts. When a European prospect breaks through, the schedule adjusts to accommodate their fan base. But when Alex Eala, the biggest tennis star from a country of 115 million people, a player who beat the world number 2 just months earlier, makes her Grand Slam main draw debut, court 6, Novak Djokovic understood this. That's why he spoke up. He called the Philippines a big country with big interest. He acknowledged that players from emerging tennis nations deserve consideration. He said publicly that the schedule could have been different. And you know what? He was right. The schedule absolutely could have been different. The Australian Open could have anticipated the demand. They could have given Alex Eala the platform her achievements warranted. They could have honored the moment for what it was, a historic first. Instead, thousands of Filipino fans got stuck in line, watching on big screens while their hero played the biggest match of her life in a venue that couldn't hold them. Now let me take you to where Alex Eala is today, because this story doesn't end with that first round loss. As of this week, Alex Eala has reached a new career high ranking of number 40 in the world. Number 40. She's the highest ranked Filipino tennis player in history, and she's climbing. After the Australian Open disappointment, she went to the Abu Dhabi Open and reached the quarterfinals. She made the semifinals in doubles with Indonesian star Janice Chen. She's now competing in the Qatar Open against the biggest names in the sport. This is what resilience looks like. This is what happens when you have talent, determination, and the support of an entire nation behind you. And here's what's beautiful about it. Just days after her Australian Open exit, Alex Eala was back on home soil for the inaugural Philippine Women's Open, the first WTA-sanctioned tournament ever held in her country. Think about that. The Philippines hosting a WTA event. That doesn't happen without Alex Eala. That doesn't happen without her breakthrough, her visibility, her ability to put Filipino tennis on the global map. She said it herself. Having a WTA tournament here is a huge stepping stone and a wake-up call. Filipinos are hardworking and passionate, and if we start to invest in our tennis players, we can slowly build more champions. That's not just an athlete talking. That's a pioneer. That's someone who understands her role extends far beyond winning matches. She's building something bigger than herself. So where does this leave us? Alex Eala is going to be just fine. She's 20 years old, ranked 41st in the world, with her best tennis still ahead of her. She's trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy. She's beaten Grand Slam champions. She's proven she belongs at the highest level of the sport. But the next time she plays a Grand Slam, whether it's Roland Garros, Wimbledon, or the US Open, I want every tournament director watching. I want them to remember what happened in Melbourne. I want them to remember the thousands of fans locked out. I want them to remember Djokovic calling them out. I want them to remember that learning for next year isn't good enough when you disrespect a player of this caliber, because Alex Eala isn't going away. Her fan base isn't going away. The Filipino tennis community, passionate, loyal, and growing every single day, isn't going away, and they deserve better. Alex Eala stayed after that heartbreaking loss to sign autographs. She posed for photos with the fans who had waited hours to see her. She showed grace in defeat that players twice her age would struggle to match. That's the kind of champion she is. Now it's time for tennis to show her the same respect. So let me ask you this. Do you think the Australian Open handled Alex Eala's debut correctly? Do you think Djokovic was right to speak out? And what do you think needs to change for players from emerging tennis nations to get the recognition they deserve? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from the Filipino tennis fans in the audience. I want to hear from everyone who watched that chaos unfold and felt frustrated. Let's get this conversation going. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep following Alex Eala's journey all the way to the top. This is just the beginning. Until next time.